Okay, everyone, here we go with Unit 4, Section 2. What we're going to be working on today is multiplying monomials. Well, what do we mean by that? Well, a monomial, if you refer to our last section of notes, we're talking about a term here, just one term. Mono being one. We're talking about one term, so we're taking one term times another term. Now, there are some things I want you to keep in mind, things to remember as we go through, well, this whole chapter, actually. Things to remember. Number one, every monomial has a coefficient. That's important for you to understand because if a coefficient is not visible, what is it? Right, the coefficient would be 1. So let's keep that in mind. One of the things that we need to remember. The other thing I want you to keep in mind is that every number has an exponent. And another reason why you need to keep that in mind is that if, again, an exponent is not visible, what is it? Right, the exponent would be 1. Now, these four rules over here to this left side, they are important, but I'm going to see if we can simplify this a little bit. Number one, we are going to pay attention to the product of powers. What that means is that I have a monomial times a monomial. There are two things you need to remember about multiplying a monomial times a monomial. Number one, you're going to multiply the coefficients, and then you're going to add the exponents of like bases. I'll tell you what I mean by that in just a few minutes. So that's what's going to happen when we take a monomial times a monomial. We multiply the coefficients. We're going to add the exponents of like bases. Now, in number one, I have y squared. That's a monomial. I'm going to take it times y to the fifth. That's another monomial. The coefficients in each case are 1. So 1 times 1 is 1, but we don't write the coefficient 1. What we will do is we're going to add together the exponents, the 2 and the 5, and I get y to the 7th power. Again, the reason why that works is because y squared means y times y. Y to the fifth means y times y times y times y times y. And I want to know how many y's am I multiplying together here? Well, I have 7 of them, so my answer would be y to the 7th. So suffice it to say, we're always going to multiply the coefficients, add the exponents of like bases. Here's what I mean by multiplying the coefficients again. Number 2, 1 times 1 is 1. We don't write that coefficient. But look at that first m. It also has an exponent. Remember, every number has an exponent. That exponent there is 1. When we multiply m to the first times m to the 7th, I'm going to add their exponents, and I get m to the 8th. In number 3, the coefficient for the first term is 3. The coefficient for the second term is 5. I multiply the coefficients. 3 times 5 is 15. I'm going to add the exponents. X to the 6th times x squared would be x to the 8th power. I just add the 6 and the 2. So I multiply the 3 and the 5, I add the 6 and the 2, and I get 15x to the 8th. In number 4, again, all these coefficients are 1, but the exponent here is also 1. So I'm going to have 1 times 1 times 1 is 1. X to the first times x to the second times x to the fourth would be x to the 1 plus 2 is 3 plus 4 is 7, x to the seventh. Number 5, multiply the coefficients. Negative 4 times 3 is negative 12. Now the like bases are the m's. I have m to the third. I'm going to jump over here to the m squared and I'll add those exponents. I'll have m to the fifth power. I have n to the first power times n to the fifth power. Add those exponents and I'll get negative 12 m to the fifth n to the sixth. And of course, the like bases, I mean the m's are like bases, the n's are like bases. So I take each of those exponents and add the exponents of the m's. I get m to the fifth. Add the exponents of the n's, and I get n to the sixth. In number 6, I'm going to take 1/3 times 2 times 6. Well, another way to do that would be take 2 times 6 and get 12. A third of that would be 4. So when I multiply the coefficients here, I get 4. How many a's do I have? I have, well, a to the third power. Here I have b to the first. Take it times b to the third, and I get b to the fourth power. Multiply the coefficients, add the exponents. All right, let's go back up here for just a second to talk about the power of a product. Notice here that we have an exponent outside the parentheses. When that happens, when this happens, multiply the exponents. Now it's also one of the things that you need to remember, also important that you remember that every number has an exponent. Every number has an exponent. So let's talk about this y having an exponent of 2. When there's a 5 outside the parentheses, I'm merely going to multiply those two exponents, and I'll get y to the 10th power. In number 2, I multiply the 7 times the 4. I'll get n to the 28th power. In number 3, this x to the second to the 5th power. Anytime you have an exponent outside the parentheses, that is going to be dealt with first. So I have 2 times 5 is 10. I'm going to have x to the 10th power. And then I'm going to bring down times x to the third. Now, before where I had x to the second to the fifth, because the exponent was outside the parentheses, we're going to simplify that first. Multiply those two exponents. Bring down x to the third. Now I'm back to doing what I was doing before, multiplying monomials. What do we do with their exponents here? We add them together, and I'm going to have x to the 13th. Multiply these two exponents. 2 times 3 is 6. So I'm going to have x to the 6th. We're going to multiply these two exponents together and get y to the 12th. Answer, x to the 6th, y to the 12th. And in number 5, we have n to the second raised to the third power, raised to the third power. We're simply going to multiply all of these exponents together because they are what I call stacked on one on top of the other. Whenever they are stacked as they are here, we're going to multiply the exponents. I have an exponent outside the parentheses. I have this exponent outside the bracket, and now I have n to the 18th. Now on page 2 here of section 2, again, it's important for you to remember that every number has an exponent. So inside the parentheses for number 1, 3 has an exponent of 1. X has an exponent of 1. Y has an exponent of 1. The rule says when the exponent is outside the parentheses, multiply that exponent times all of the exponents inside the parentheses. So I'm going to take 3 I am going to multiply this 2 times the 1 and I get 3 squared. This does not mean 3 times 2 is 6. It means 3 squared. And then I'm going to take the x to the first power and multiply the 2 times the 1 and I get x squared. I'm going to multiply for the y the 2 times the 1 and get y squared. You now evaluate the 3 squared. That's 9. Again, it's not 6. It doesn't mean 3 times 2 is 6. It means 3 squared is 9. X squared, y squared. This will be your final answer. Now in number 2, the 3 is not inside the parentheses this time, so we're just simply going to bring the 3 down. Remember that every number has an exponent. That's 3 to the first power. It's not being raised to the second power. X has an exponent of 1, y has an exponent of 1. Multiply the 2 outside times both of the exponents inside, and you get 3x squared y squared. Number 3, m has an exponent of 1, n has an exponent of 1. Multiply the exponents, m to the third, n to the third. I'm going to have that times m squared, n squared. Now what are we doing? Well, we're multiplying numbers of the same base. I'm multiplying 2 monomials here. I have m to the third times m squared. What do we do with these two exponents? We're back to adding them together because we're multiplying the monomials. I have m to the third, n to the third is 1 monomial. I'm multiplying it times m to the second, n to the second, which is another monomial. So I'm multiplying 2 monomials. What do? Multiply the coefficients. 1 times 1 is 1. Add the exponents of like bases. M to the third times m to the second would be m to the fifth. N to the third times n to the second is n to the fifth power as well. Final answer, m to the fifth, n to the fifth. Number 1 below, again, you have an exponent outside the parentheses. Simply multiply that exponent times all of the exponents inside the parentheses. So 5 times 2 is 10. That means we'll have x to the 10th power. 5 times 4 is 20. We'll have y to the 20th power. Final answer. Number 2. Remember that every number inside the parentheses has an exponent. It's 4 to the first power, y to the first power. The reason why it's important to remember that is because the exponent outside the parentheses gets multiplied times all of the exponents inside the parentheses. So it's not 4 times 3 is 12, it's 4 raised to the third power. X to the sixth, y to the third. Evaluate the 4 to the third power, you get 64. X to the sixth, y to the third, final answer. In number 3, the negative 3 here is not being raised to the fourth power. Bring down the negative 3. Every number inside the parentheses has an exponent. That's m to the first power. 4 times 1 is 4, m to the fourth. N to the fourth inside the parentheses, that 4 gets multiplied by the 4 inside, n to the 16th power. Your final answer, negative 3, m to the fourth, n to the 16th. Sorry about the interruption there. I hope that wasn't too bad for you. Number 4, let's take a look at it. Negative 3 is being raised to the first power. M is being raised to the first power. N is being raised to the fourth power. In this case, the negative 3 is inside the parentheses. Its exponent, 1, gets multiplied times the 4. You'll need to put that negative 3 in parentheses. All negative numbers go in parentheses. You'll see why when we plug this into your calculator. 4 times 1 is 4, so I'm going to have negative 3 inside the parentheses raised to the fourth power. I'll have m to the fourth and n to the 16th. Now there's a difference between negative 3 raised to the fourth power and negative 3 in parentheses raised to the fourth power. Are these two things equal to each other? No. If you were to plug the negative 3 to the fourth power into your calculator without using parentheses, you would come up with negative 81. If you use the parentheses, put it around the negative 3, and then raise that to the fourth power, we would get positive 81. Those two are not equal. And so negative 3 in parentheses raised to the fourth power is positive 81. So your final answer would be 81 m to the fourth n to the 16th. Number 1 of the mixed exercises. Always take care of any exponent outside of the parentheses first. Take that exponent times all of the exponents inside. So I'm going to have negative 2. It's raised to the first power inside the parentheses, so 3 times 1 would be 3. A to the first power. 3 times 1 is 3. B to the second power. 3 times 2 is 6. Then we take care of the other exponent outside the parentheses, a to the 8th. So I'm multiplying this monomial, negative 2 raised to the third power, a to the third, b to the 6th. I have that monomial times the monomial a to the 8th. Since I'm multiplying two numbers, two monomials, I multiply their coefficients. Negative 2 to the third power is negative 8. The coefficient for this one is 1, so negative 8 times 1 is negative 8. Add the exponents of like bases. I have a to the third times a to the 8th would be a to the 11th. Bring down the b to the 6th. In number 2, I'm going to have negative 4, remember it goes in parentheses, raised to the third, x to the third, y to the third. I'm going to have negative 2 raised to the third power, x to the 6th power. Negative 4 raised to the third power is negative 4 times negative 4 times negative 4. That's negative 64. X to the third, y to the third. I have negative 2 to the third power. That's negative 8, x to the 6th. Multiply the coefficients. I have negative 64 times negative 8. A double negative makes it positive. 64 times 8, 512. X to the third times x to the 6th. Add their exponents. X to the 9th. Bring down the y to the third power. In number 3, the negative 3 is not inside the parentheses. Bring it down. I'm going to have 2 to the 4th power, x to the 4th. I'm going to have 4 to the 2nd power, x to the 10th, y to the 2nd. Multiply, plug this into your calculator. Multiply out the negative 3 times 2 to the 4th times 4 squared. What would you get? When you multiply that out, you'll get negative 768. Then you have x to the 4th times x to the 10th is x to the 14th. The only thing you have left is y to the 2nd power. So your answer for number 3 would be negative 768, x to the 14th, y squared. Now refer to your assignment page, do your assignment, and we will see you in class.